Hi everyone, my name is Rachel and welcome to the French Seams. So for today's video, I thought it'd be fun to do something a little bit different. So I would like to make the Tilly and the Buttons Billie sweatshirt. I'm sure you've heard me talk about it so much. So it is this pattern right here. You can do a dress, but I would like to make just the plain sweatshirt version. And I have this beautiful sweatshirting fleecy fabric from the Crafty Studio and navy ribbing. And I thought it'd be fun to take you along with me as I sew it up. So I thought it'd be kind of a chatty vlog, a kind of tips and tricks on what I do to make a sweatshirt. I do have a how to make a jersey t-shirt vlog, which I'll link below, but I've never done a sweatshirt, and 90% of the time I live in sweatshirts. I live in comfy clothes. They're great. So I thought it'd be fun to take you along with me. So today I've got a Jennifer Lauren MET on with little flamingos, again from the Crafty Studio. So it'd be nice, kind of a chilled out sewing day for myself. But I thought a Billie would be perfect for my wardrobe, and you know how much I love green. So I do have, I think I'd counted, I think I have about 13 Billie sweatshirts. So clearly I need another one, but it's just the most versatile pattern and you can make it in a wide variety of fabrics. So I just love it. I've made it in sweatshirt, I've made it in heavy knit, I've made it in cotton jersey. I just love it. So I listed them out here. So I'll put in a little reel of all my ones here. So I've done ones for Easter, I've done ones for Christmas as Christmas pajamas, I've done Valentine's themed ones, I've embellished them with a little Christmas tree. I've made the dress version and I put the Tilly and the Buttons Freya cowl neck on it. I love that version. I have done the balloon sleeve. I then took out the balloon sleeve. I prefer the straight version. I've also hacked it into a maternity jumper. I think I did that on a good few of them. Basically, you make your usual size, extend the front by 5 inches, then just above the waist, you gather it all the way down and then just sew up the side seams and sew on the hemband. Absolutely perfect. And then later you can just take out the gathering stitches and just take off those 5 inches. It works beautifully. And then I've also most recently made it with a beautiful Liberty collar that I did a little collaboration with Catherine from Sophie Makery. So you can see how utterly versatile this pattern is. It doesn't take long to make up, not at all. I cut this out, I'd say, in about 20-25 minutes. Really easy, really great pattern, really great instructions. So I thought it'd be a fun one to do with you. So you can see my pattern is well loved, well worn. I make a size 4 at the bust, grading to a 5 at the hips according to my measurements, and I add 1.5 inches to the sleeve length. So yeah, and I just love the fit, love how quickly it comes together. Really fun, really versatile, and you can use a variety of fun fabrics, which is why I thought this would be really great. So without further ado, we shall get started. So I'm not really following along the pattern. We'll get there in the end, but it's not really in the order that they might do it. But the first thing we're going to do is join the front and back bodice pieces at the shoulder seams. I have my overlocker here, so I'm just going to pin these straight away and get them onto the overlocker. So I think in some Tilly and the Buttons patterns, she does say to stabilize the shoulder seams. And you can get special tape to do that, or you can use ribbon. I don't tend to do that more often than not. If I have stabilizing tape to hand, then I do use it, but more often than not I don't, and I've never really found any massive issue with it, but we'll see. I like, when I'm sewing with knits, I like using clips purely because you can see them going in the overlocker. Sometimes you don't see a pin going through an overlocker, which yeah, let's not go there. Not a very safe thing to do. And I have gone over a few pins very recently, and it ain't pretty. It ain't pretty, my friends. So I don't sew this on my sewing machine first. I just go straight to the overlocker at your 5/8 seam allowance, and it just trims off the edges as well and gives a very nice finish. I've just threaded my overlocker with white. I've got a Singer overlocker from Lidl that I've had about 8 years, and it's absolutely perfect. I love it. So I'm just going to put these through the overlocker and be right back. So here's our shoulder seams all sewn together, so you can see the bodice is coming together. So the next thing I like to do is look towards the ribbing. So I got this again in Crafty Studio. I thought the navy went very well. It picks up some of the little navy, we'll call them rainbows, shall we? So you've got 2 cuff pieces, you've got a neckband, and you've got a hemband, which comes in 2 pieces as well. So the neckband on the Billie is very wide. I always use ribbing for doing a Billie. I think because it's so wide, if you use self fabric, I don't think it necessarily has enough stretch, and it can end up sitting a little bit proud. So I always make sure to use ribbing. You can, of course, do the thing where you measure the neck, the circumference of the neck, and then do what is 70-80% or whatever for the ribbing. I generally get away with the pattern piece size. I think it's always worked fine. Nothing a good press won't come out, but I always baste it first on my sewing machine, so we'll get to that now in a mini moment. But yeah, it is a quite wide neckband, which I kind of like the look of. So one little trick I do that I have done for a number of years, and I've seen it on Instagram a good few times recently, but it's the cleverest trick ever. So for your cuffing, your ribbing, if you take, this is a cuff piece, and this is the right side, if you fold it right sides together, and I think in the instructions, they just tell you to fold it right sides together, pin and clip, and then sew the seam down like this. You then get a quite bulky seam. What I like to do is fold it once like this, then fold that again back on itself. So you now have 4 layers. So here you go. Give that a quick pin or clip, I should say, and then run that through the overlocker. And then you'll see by magic how it comes out with a not very bulky seam at all. So here we go. So here you go, white, but nobody will notice. So you've now got a small little hem. If I just snip off the other side of that thread, just for neatness, then if you unfold this, you have 1 seam and a lovely little cuff. So you get just one very, very neat seam like this. It's not very bulky at all. And because all of the seam allowance in this is folded to one side, it makes it very easy then to nest when you're putting it into the garment, which makes for a very, very nice finish, that all your cuff seam and your underhand seam match up perfectly. So that's a neat little trick. So I'm now going to do this on the 2 cuff pieces. I'm going to do it when I join the 2 hemband pieces together. So you have 2 side seams on the hemband, and then you can also do it on the neckband very, very easily as well. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. Right, so that's all done. Another tip I like to do here is that when you're overlocking, you just chain piece. So you just run them through one after another, and then you can just snip them all after, rather than frantically rifling for your scissors when you're trying to finish a serge seam, which sometimes, yeah. So sewing time is precious, and any little quick win I can get along the way, I try to do. So here are all my little pieces. I'll show you how the hemband comes out with that little trick. So it's all very, very neat and tidy. There you go, it all just folds out nicely, and there's the lovely hemband with your 2 seams. So I like to kind of do things in batches, so that's all the ribbing done. Bada bing. And now we can move on to the neckband. So the neckband, here it is. So I like to do it in quarters when I'm fitting it into the neck, the neck. So here's this turned out. So you can see obviously that's one side. Then you just half it like this. For this, I do actually use pins. Because I'm going to put it through the sewing machine first to baste it. There is nothing worse than putting in a neckband, overlocking it, and then taking it out and realise it's bunched or not even. It's just the worst. So I always baste it on the sewing machine first. So once I've done that pin, I then half it again, and I get each side bit. So now you've got it in quarters. If you're not familiar with doing neckbands, or if it's a very, very long neckband, say in a scoop neck garment, feel free obviously to do it in 8ths, as many pins as you like. There is absolutely no judgment here when you're pinning. If you think that 64 pins will work for you, you go ahead and do that. You really do. It'll give a beautiful finish, that's for sure. So I've now quartered my neckband. So, and I've got these nice flathead pins, they're very pretty. So now you get your bodice piece, and you have your 2 shoulder pieces like this. So I then fold them together, and that gets me the center point of the front and back bodice. So pop 2 little pins in there. This fabric is so lovely and stable, it's beautiful to work with. So now you've got your center point, front and back, and then don't think that the shoulder seams are the other quarter points. They're not, because the front bodice is bigger than the back bodice. So what you then need to do is line up the 2 pins here, and you can see that the difference, this is actually where the pin goes. So that's your quarter point. So it's just beyond the shoulder seam. So that'll give you 4 nice even points to match in your neckband. So if I finish pinning this, and we're done. So this is what your bodice then looks like, and you've got your 4 pins. Then basically you're going to match, where's that guy gone? Hello. So there's, you've got 4 pins, and then basically you want to match your neckband to it. So I like to do the neckband back seam at the very back. So you do that right sides together, and then for each pin you just stretch. And what you then need to do is ease it ever so slightly to match up with the other points. So if I match the 2 back ones here, that's not the back one, there we go. That wouldn't be great, would it? Some patterns have you do the seam at the side, but again, personal preference. So now, so I match up my first quarter point just on the left hand side, so match up those 2 pins and repin, and then take out that guy. And you can see there that the garment is slightly bigger, so you just ease that ever so gently, pull this up and then you can hold it here. I do like to put in a good few pins, so put that one, and then you can hold onto these pins. Again, ease it ever so slightly so you can see it's getting easier and easier. Bring them together, so put another pin here and do that all the way around. So I've just spun you around now. This is my lovely sewing machine. So I have a Juki, which I love. It was my 40th birthday present, which was a couple of years ago now. So I'm just rethreading. I've just made a bobbin. So I've just done a little dark green bobbin. So I'm just top loading that now into the machine. And we're going to baste on our neckband. So yeah, I do love this machine. I really, really do. I use it all the time. And yeah, it's only failed me once. I managed to break the bobbin case. Don't ask me how, but center it, you fixed. And it's back beautifully. But yeah, you just get so used to your own machine, don't you? It's wonderful. So here is my fully pinned neckband. So you can see I'm a little bit of easing there on each side. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to run it through the machine. So I'm going to move this up to about 3.2, bit of a basting length for a stitch, just in case I have to unpick it later. I'll move my lovely little magnetic sewing dish over here. So I like to put the neckband on the top. That means that you have control over easing that in. So feed it onto the machine like this. I'll start at the back seam and we'll just see how we go. I again, don't sew over pins, don't sew over pins. What I could get actually is my lovely magnetic seam gauge. So these are really great. They're little magnets. So I have a sewing machine one and I have a tape machine one, and they're magnetic on the back, and you can sit it onto the throat plate of your machine and it can give you a very, very nice seam allowance. So I'm going to attach that at the 5/8 of an inch just to give me a very nice guide. So I'm going to baste this ever so gently. So I'm going to go all the way around, each time taking out the pin before I go over it. And then we'll turn out the bodice and see, do I have any puckers or tucks? Right, cut the threads. That's me all the way around the neckband. Moment of truth, let's see. So has this gone in with any? I think that looks pretty good, pretty nice and even. There's no little tucks or anything, which is always good news. Again, a nice little press always covers a multitude when you're done. So I think that looks pretty good. So you can see it's just sewn in. So what I'm going to do now is pop over to the overlocker and just give it a quick overlock on the edges, and that will of course reduce the seam allowance as well, because the current seam allowance is 5/8 of an inch, but with the overlocker then I reduce it to 1/4 of an inch. So I'm just going to run it through the overlocker right now. So I've just overlocked all the edges now. So I like to start and stop at the back seam because that'll be covered shortly. So it's looking pretty good. Everything seems to be lying nice and flat. So what you can do now is give it a little press. I have a little mini ironing station set up behind me. So I'm just going to give it a little bit of a steamy press, which will definitely help. And then comes the fun bit. We can choose our binding. So I've given it that little press now. I have the cutest little iron. It's one from the Quilted Bear. Mr. French Seams got it for me for Christmas. I did ask him for it, don't worry. But I've just given that nice little press. It's so handy having a little pressing station right behind me. So I think that's looking pretty good. The next thing I like to do is to bind the neckline. I find it easier if you don't have any sleeves on. So I talk about binding a neckline all the time. I'm not going to bore you. I have a full video on how to do that, so I'll link that below. I'm just going to run you through it very, very quickly now. So we shall choose our binding. So I've got my binding here in little IKEA drawers. It's in no particular order. Oh dear, I really should tidy it up. So I got plenty to choose from. So I use Becky Seamstress binding. Absolutely love it. So I have little sunshines, which could be quite nice. Little rubber duckies. All manner of little daisies, which are very cute. And then this one, it doesn't have to be perfect. I quite like that one. And then this one is Sewing Makes Me Happy. Again, I love that one. I do have the Christmas ones, which I love. I think I'm going to go for the sunshines. I think they look quite nice. So let's go for the sunshines on this one. Yeah, let's do it. So I've already reduced my seam allowance here on the back to 1/4 inch, which is perfect. I'll just measure out very, very roughly how much I'll need. So probably about that much, give that a little chop, and then we shall line it up. So basically what we do on your back seam like this, you line it up so that you have your binding lying like that. So basically you need to start with it flapped up like this, and then you sew it into the back seam. So I'll bring you down here and show you what I mean. So I folded under the end of the binding ever so slightly, line that up with the back seam just beyond the shoulder seam. Give that a little pin. Then if you line up the edge of the binding with the very edge here, your crease in the binding should be sitting directly on top of your stitch line here. So when you've done that, bring it to your machine, sew all the way along the crease, all the way around the other side seam. And when you get there, you can fold in that end as well, just to give it a very nice finish as well. Be aware of using directional binding to make sure that it's going in the right direction. What you should have now is the back of your garment, and you should have this binding just like this. So what you do now is you fold it down and then you edge stitch all the way along this bottom edge right here. So I'm going to go and find some yellow thread for my top thread. I can keep the green because that's going to be on the back of the garment, that's fine, but I'm going to find a nice yellow now to match that. So one thing at this stage is you can decide if you want to put in a label. So on the centre back seam of the garment is a very nice place to put a label, and I love Little Rosy Cheeks labels. It's my box of labels. I love Cozy Kilt handmade labels. I love Kind the Machine labels. They are just wonderful. And for the back seam, something like this folded up label is perfect, because then you can just sew in these, and if it's got, you know, writing in the back or anything, that's perfect. So I like this one, Savage Not Average. So now is a great opportunity to put in a label, but I think I'm going to make mine more visible, so I'm just going to do my binding at this stage. Right, so we have finished the back binding. So you can see the edge stitching there. I was able to use my awl, which is very, very handy for keeping everything in place. So I found semi-matching yellow thread there for the top stitching, and then at the back is just the green, but it's just one line. I don't think that really matters. I think it gives a bit of a professional finish. So that is our neckband bound. The next step now is to add the sleeves. So just pin them on now. So the next step, adding sleeves. So each sleeve piece will have a notch signifying the very, very top, the shoulder seam, and then it will have one notch showing the front, and then two notches at the back, usually, depending on the pattern designer. So then they match up with your bodice piece. So what I'm going to do now is find my centre notch and match that to my shoulder seam. And I'm going to clip that because I'm going to do these on my overlocker again. And then you match your two notches here, and then you match your side seam here. There's generally not very much easing going on between the very start and the notches. There's generally minimal easing going on there, but then the easing happens just all the way along the sleeve head to give you kind of range of movement. So again, just like the neckband, you can see that this is slightly bigger. You just bring them together and ease them very slightly in. So it's not a huge amount of easing at all. So it should be fairly okay. But again, just use as many clips as you like. So I love making jersey makes. I've made so many. When I first started sewing, I think I used the Linden sweatshirt. That was one of the jersey patterns that was doing the rounds when I started sewing about 7-8 years ago. The Billie hadn't been invented yet. I just loved sewing jersey. I remember my first jersey garment taking off the sewing machine thinking, wow, this is next level. And then my husband came home one day with an overlocker, and that was just a complete game changer. Just the finish the overlocker gives you, the way it's so quick. I was just in love with jersey makes. So from then on, I've just been hooked, and I've made all kinds of jumpers and sweatshirts and t-shirts and hoodies and dresses, and the sky is the limit. So I've now attached my sleeve into my bodice piece. I'm going to do the exact same for the other sleeve, give them a quick overlock and come straight back. Right, so the sleeves are in, so it's beginning to look like a sweatshirt, which is great. The next stage then is to pin the side seams. So turn it right sides together, inside out, and then we're just going to pin all the way along or clip I should say, all the way along the underarm and all the way down the side seam. Do that on both sides and then give it a quick overlock. So I like as well to make sure that that this cross section where it gets the sleeve and the bodice, that matches up nicely as well. So I tend to do that first, and then I do the cuff bit and then the very hem side, and then just ease the rest in just to make sure it all sits very, very nicely. But yeah, this jersey is just beautiful to work with. It doesn't seem to shift or stretch or do anything. It's a lovely, lovely stable knit. If you're working with something like a viscose jersey or something like that, it might be a little bit more tricky, or like maybe a modal or something, but with this sweatshirting fabric, it's just beautiful. It's so nice. So yeah, the Billie is just such a marvellous pattern. It's never failed me. It has never ever failed me. The Billie dress is very, very nice to make. I have made one Billie dress with pockets, which I really like. I made it in quite a heavy sweatshirting think it's in a kind of a pink leopardy print fabric. It's just fabulous. I think I got that from Beyond the Pink Door actually years ago, with the Freya cowl neck, which matched perfectly. The two Tilly in the Buttons patterns matched perfectly. That was really, really nice. And then, but I've recently made the South Bank sweater. That's by Nina Lee. So again, that's a lovely sweater dress, and it's a beautiful dress actually. I've made that up recently. I left out the pockets because I did hear they just add a bit of bulk, where I certainly don't want any bulk. So I think I used to think that they were quite similar and that I didn't need both in my life. I absolutely need both in my life. I think they serve very different purposes. The Billie is a far more kind of relaxed dress. The South Bank is a lot more fitted. It's very, very smart looking. I did the roll neck. It's absolutely beautiful. So there's definitely room for a Nina Lee South Bank and a Billie dress in my life. As I mentioned before, the Linden. I haven't made a Linden sweatshirt in a long time, and I still have one that I wear that I made in about 2017 that I still wear. I love it. But I need to revisit that actually. But there's just so many out there, so many wonderful, wonderful sweatshirt patterns, and they're all unique in their own way. And of course, you can hack them for whatever purpose you like. That's the beauty of making our own clothes, isn't it? You can make them fit you perfectly, and you can do anything you like with them. So I've now pinned the two side seams, and I'm going to take them to the overlocker and finish off the bodice. So before you sew up your side seams, now is another lovely opportunity to put in a little label. So I like to put them in the side seam, so just above the hemband. So wherever you do put it in, make sure that you've left enough room for your seam allowance here. So make sure there's at least 2.5 centimeters before you add in your label. So a nice side seam one to use could be something like this, a double-sided one. I made this and it feels good. That's perfect to put in a side seam. Maybe a slightly bigger one if you like. So maybe something like this Cozy Club handmade one. I love this. Oops, mistakes were made, solutions were found. Again, that's another perfect side seam one. So what you do is you take out the bottom clip like this, and then before you pin it together, you take your little label, make sure it's facing the right way, and then right sides together like this. Inside you can line it up like this. Just make sure that you've left enough seam allowance. So I do have a little gauge. In fact, I have two. I have a Kylian machine one, that's a little gauge, and then I also have a hemline one, I think, or one of those ones. So basically we know that our seam allowance is 5/8 of an inch, so this one here. So what you need to do is you need to line up your label. So say you're using this one, line up your label to make sure that you've got enough clearance. So you can see here, if I put that on the 5/8, it would actually go over it. So you need to move it down ever so slightly before you put it into your side seam. But it's a very, very nice place to put a little label. And then of course it'll just be visible then when you wear it, which is lovely, because I think these labels are sometimes too pretty to not show them. So you just pop it in here, measure down. So you might even end up putting it roughly here to make sure that you're going to catch in your seam allowance. You can baste it in, so you can hand baste it, or I sometimes baste it with Pritt stick. It works perfectly well. Just a little bit of Pritt stick. I do it on the inside first to stick them together, and then stick it into the side seam and then baste over it. If you are putting a label into the side seam, I would recommend it doing that on a sewing machine first and then overlocking, just to make sure you've got your calculations correct. So I'm again thinking I'm going to make mine a little bit more visible, so I'm going to hold on with my labels until the very, very end. The bodice is now all sewn up, and now is actually a nice opportunity to do a little fit test. So shall we see how it's looking? All it's missing now is the cuffs and the hemband, but we're in pretty good shape. It's now pretty much a sweatshirt, so we'll see what it looks like on. I have my Tilly Buttons Stella joggers on today, so I think this is looking pretty good. So nice neckline here, the shoulder seams are in the right place, the arms are in the right place. I just love it. This fits me so well. And I've got a little bit here of the cuff, so I'll be putting on my cuff band, so I know that that'll bridge the gap there. I think it's a nice length. So yeah, very, very happy. We'll move on to the last stage, putting on the cuffs and putting on the waistband. Right, we're almost there. So putting in the cuffs and putting in the waistband is exactly the same as putting in the neckband. So once you've done that, you can do all of it. So I'm going to do the waistband first, I think. So here's your waistband. Again, you've got your two edges, and then actually the crease and the ribbing actually gives a dead giveaway of where the other center points are, which is very, very useful. So I'm just going to mark those with pins initially, but I do just sew this directly on my overlocker. So I think because there's minimal easing in it, and the margin for error is quite small in the hemband, so I do just go straight to my overlocker. With the cuffs, sometimes to make sure that those side seams match up, just between the underarm seam and the seam of the cuff, I do sometimes base that on my sewing machine first, just to make sure I give a really, really nice finish. So I'll just continue doing this, just pinning all the way around my quarter points. One thing I want to mention actually about doing jersey makes is that you can sometimes get a little bit more adventurous, because if you can make a sweater like this, you could then easily move on to something like the kilo wrap dress, which I absolutely love, which is basically just a long jumper. So you'd be well able to do something like that. So once you kind of get used to jersey makes, it's just brilliant. So I've now finished pinning my hemband. So in the middle I've done a centre point and then 2 either side on each front and back. So I'm just finishing off doing the exact same on the bodice. So I'll do the 2 side seams, and then I'll do the centre back, and then I'll do 1 either side, and that should give me a very good place to start when I'm pinning the waistband and the bodice piece together. And then you just take them to your overlocker and then finish them off. Again, adding the waistband to the bodice, again, is a lovely place to add a label, and it's a nice place to add a label like I showed you earlier. So unlike this, where you've got the double-sided, so when you're pinning your waistband to your bodice, I usually like doing it just at the front there, just beyond the side seam. So you would move it, again, make sure that you got the seam allowance correct. So you'd pop it into the seam or the bodice like this, put your waistband on top again if you'd like to baste it first, and then when that's worn, it flaps down. What I like to do is actually top stitch the seam allowance to the bodice. That means that when it's shown, it doesn't actually just flap up, so it sits very, very nicely. Hopefully I'll pop in a picture of what I mean here. But I think that's a very, very lovely place to put a label. But I'm going to put a label actually on my waistband, so I'll do that as the last thing. So I've now got all my points pinned on my bodice, and basically it's just a case of matching them, which is very, very easy. So the 2 side seams go together, and because you've got your nice nifty way of doing your ribbing, they can nest very easily with your bodice piece. So because the ribbing seam allowance is going this way, I know that my bodice piece should go that way, and you can squash them very nicely together or nest them together. And again, it'll give a very, very nice finish because the 2 seams will match up hopefully pretty perfectly. So I'm going to pin that now, and I'm going to match up all my pins all the way across, and then I'll take it to my serger and finish off the hemband. The waistband is on. So here we go. So you can see what I mean about the nesting of the hemband and the bodice. You can see that those seams are nicely aligned, which gives a very, very nice finish. Not everybody will notice, but of course we will. So the process is exactly the same about doing the cuffs. So the cuffs, the pinning I think really is minimal. So basically I just pin the halfway point across the other side. So pin this one here, pin the cushion go over here, and then just do the exact same on the cuff. So now you've just got a center point and you can just ease those in. So do the 2 cuffs and then we are done. Right, and here is our finished Billie. So it's looking pretty good. Here we go. So the very last thing now I'd like to add is my little label, and I've been having to think about this, and my eye caught this. It says made to party. I mean, really, wouldn't that just look perfect? Because who doesn't love a little sweatshirt party? So I'm going to add this onto the hemband, which is how I love to add my labels now, because they're totally visible and I think people need to see these. I think they're super, super cute. So I like to add them just on the right hand side of the hemband as I'm wearing it. So on the hemband here, you can of course add it before you insert the hemband flat, but I like to add it just through 2 layers and give an extra layer of security. So I'm just going to center it maybe roughly around here, I think, something like that. And I'm going to change my overlocker thread to navy, my sewing machine thread to navy, and I'm going to show you how I attach a little label like this. But yeah, I think this label is perfect. Back at my sewing machine, I've changed my thread to navy. I have a little Quilted Bear quilting ruler, which is really handy for centering the label. I'm going to attach it with a little bit of Pritt stick, just for a bit of security, and then I'm going to use a very, very small zigzag stitch to attach the label, and credit goes entirely to my lovely friend So Let's Sparkle with Sam, the lovely Sam, for showing me this technique. I think it looks beautiful. So I'll show you, I'll center this and stick it on and come back to you and show you exactly how to attach it. So I've now centered this and stuck it on with a Pritt stick, which is really, really handy. It's washable, which is great. So I'm now going to put this into my sewing machine. I'm going to change to a zigzag stitch. So in my case, that's number 3. The standard stitch length here is 1.4. I'm going to bring it down to 0.3. So a very, very narrow zigzag, all the way down to 0.3. And on each side, I'm just going to zigzag all the way along. So it does take a little bit of time. You do have to be patient, but the effect it gives is marvellous. I'm going to start maybe at the top, halfway along the top, all the way to the edge, down the other side, then back up, and all 4 sides. And I think the effect looks really, really good. So I'll show you now how to do this. These little Rosy Cheeks labels are just gorgeous. I think the party one is just marvellous. And who doesn't love a little bit of glitter? So center this here with your foot, and I shall bring you down. And off we go. One other finishing touch you can do, which isn't necessary, some people like to do it, some people don't, is you can actually top stitch down the seam allowance on the front neckband. So a little line of stitching all the way along the front, which catches the seam allowance on the underside, just prevents it from flapping up. So you can of course do that as well. So I've switched back to green thread on my sewing machine, and it's less than a 1/4 inch seam allowance. You can just kind of eyeball it. Usually is what I do. I set it to quite a long stitch length, so maybe 3.2. You can of course use Maraflex thread if you have it, which is the stretchy thread. I don't have it in this colour, so I'm just going to use regular thread. It comes out fine just if you make your stitch length a little bit longer. So I'm going to do that now all the way around the front neckband. So here is my finished neckline. I think it looks really, really nice. So it's just an optional extra should you choose to. So that's now done, and my label is now done. So look at the shine on that. I just love that technique. So thank you very, very much, Sam. It's marvellous. So that is our Billie sweatshirt done, and I'm just so delighted with it. I'm going to go now and give it a good press, a good iron, and hopefully pop in some pictures of it here to show you. But thank you very, very much for keeping me company today in making this Billie sweatshirt. Bit of a different video for me today, but I do hope you enjoyed it. If you have sewn the Billie, or if you haven't sewn the Billie yet but would like to, please let me know in the comment box below, along with any other questions or comments you have on today's video. I love hearing from you all. I love having the chats. Thank you very, very much for following along. If you like this video, I'd very much love it if you would give me a thumbs up, and also please consider subscribing. But I will hopefully see you very, very soon in another video. Take care, everyone. Bye.